Good morning, everybody. Today is Tuesday, September 14th, or at least it will be by the time this goes live, and I'll never get sick of saying that. My name is Jay Leask, and this is the M365 Government Community Call. Sarah, Jeremy, Rima, hello.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
I feel like it's been forever since we've all actually been together because Jeremy keeps going on vacations.
I'm here 2 months in a row, and you're complaining that I'm not here for the previous.
Oh, were you here last month? Yeah, clearly I wasn't here last month mentally.
It was just one time, but it was like that Roxette song was playing in his head, you know, must have been that.
Oh man. So we've got a great show today. I forget what we're talking about the Power Platform, right? Oversimplifying. A couple of really awesome guests joining us. But before we do, let's jump into the news. As a reminder, the Microsoft Teams team puts out a what's new in Microsoft Teams every month, summarizing everything that came out in the last month. That's a really good place to start. We'll post the link here. But for some specifics, Jeremy, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I really want to highlight. So, since I operate in the government cloud every single day, we care a lot about retention and records management. And so one of the big announcements was that private channels now have retention for the chat, which we've been putting the kibosh on private channels because we couldn't do retention. So that's a huge deal for us to now be able to roll that out. And then a quirky fun, the customizable praise app. We noticed it in our tenant this week, and people are starting to use it for good and for evil, but it should be a lot of fun. So we're looking forward to that. Plus, there's a lot more that came up, but those are two of the big highlights that have been talked about amongst my agency fellows this week.
For good, for evil, and for snark, huh?
That's right.
I'm like curious to know what the evil part is from praise. It's like, haha, you're doing good.
How is
shame on you?
Evil?
Yeah.
No, I should remain mum about that for now.
There we go.
That's awesome. Thank you for mentioning the what's new in Teams for August. As folks probably already know, every month the team's cool people in engineering, we post a blog every month, and at the bottom of that blog we have a huge government section. So I'm going to go through some of the highlights from that blog, just because sometimes it's easier to hear somebody talk about it versus read black text on white background. So the first thing, and actually this isn't even mentioned in the blog, this is from direct for me, but so now GCC can actually have 25,000 members per team, which is huge. I think before it was 10,000, right? And so we've been slowly trickling up. When we first released Teams, it was 2,500, then 5,000, 10,000, and now 25,000. For folks in GCC High and DoD, we're still working on getting up to that number, and that is our goal. But right now, GCC has that 25,000 member limit, which is awesome. Another kind of high note for GCC is that you can customize your organization's app store with custom logos and backgrounds and text colors. Plus, you can start recording and live transcription at the same time in a meeting. And another meeting feature is that you can have the reporter / side-by-side presenter mode view when you're sharing a desktop or window in a meeting, which is really cool. Something that's applicable to both GCC and GCC High is that now for Mac OS, for our Mac people of the world, you have native Teams notifications, and you can include computer sound when sharing on a Mac. For GCC and GCC High too, you have new settings for managing attendees' audio and video in a meeting, and you can also lower all of the, everybody's raised hands. People always have so many questions. It's let's lower those hands, right? And then for GCC High specifically, we have these breakout room timers now, so you can, when the timer runs out and expires, all those folks are actually going to go back to the main meeting. And then, if you're in that main meeting, you're managing that main meeting, you can reassign participants back to the rooms when they're reopened. And then these assignments can also, persist over multiple breakout room sessions. And then finally, for GCC High and DoD, you can change your chat preview notifications when sharing your screen. So if you're sharing your desktop or something, and you kind of want to hide what people are chatting with you, you can change your preview notifications. And you also have now new Windows 10 native notifications for Teams. So they show up in your Action Center bar. So.
All right, show of hands. Who's using the native notifications? I see. I knew Jeremy was going to say no to this.
I don't want to be bugged by any notifications. I disable notifications completely. Otherwise, I can't focus on what I'm working on.
Yeah, I mean, and especially because, like, my team, a lot of people that I talk, like, interact with, we're a bunch of chatty Cathys, myself included. So, like, it's usually not even important because it's just like, oh my God, Sarah, did you see the newest episode of Drag Race? And I'm like, I'm working on something, but we'll talk about it. So, yeah, I have to disable that. Otherwise, same with Jeremy, I would never get any work done.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Oh, next is me. Yeah. So prepare yourself, get your umbrellas because storms are coming, and it's Wakeman. For
those of you who don't know what she's talking about, she has an amazing meme she's pulled together. Something wicked this way, something Wakeman this way comes. We got to make sure we post that in the chat here.
Oh yeah. So it's like a guy with his umbrella in the rainstorm, and it took off way more than I thought it would. But everyone thinks it's funny, so it's good. But anyways, so recently we have published the CMMC acceleration update for September. It includes things like links to our new homepage specifically for the CNMC from Microsoft. We also have updates on the CMMC AV Industry Advisory Council, the technical reference guide that we have available for CMMC, our product placemat. I don't know. I need the copy.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's a placemat, but whatever.
Yeah, it's a placeman. He's just there showing you all the things.
He's just pointing people in the right direction.
You're compliant, but you're not. We have our CMMC workbook. A bunch of resources are listed all within this document, as well as any pertinent updates or anything that's coming up in the near future. So please be sure to pay attention to that. And we have a lot more publications coming from Wakeman and his team. So be prepared for more publications and more memes because they're coming. What? It's good for the LinkedIn algorithm.
I don't think CMMC is not going anywhere anytime soon. So
no,
it seems to be the topic du jour.
Show off my shirt too.
There it is. Zero trust.
Yeah.
That really is a fantastic shirt. Thank you for that.
Oh, no.
From the awesome people at Steel Root. And there's also another CMMC shirt I have too. And I will be showing that off on social media as well because I love this stuff. So please keep the swag coming.
And post-production, we're going to have to make sure like a little $ appears over you when you do that. Because clearly you're getting... No, I'm kidding.
I am not, actually.
All right, so moving into our events, being the end of the fiscal year, there's no surprise at the lack of events happening right now that are government focused, but there were 3 that I know that we were able to dig up. The Microsoft Azure Government DC meetup group has AI and government on September 29th. Jeremy, you I didn't even know this one existed. The NARA M365 user groups coming up.
Yeah, I've been participating with the NARA Microsoft 365 user group for probably 3 months now, and it's very, very popular. It's got a lot of federal employees. In fact, you have to be a government employee to attend. The only way to register is through max.gov. We'll put a link in the chat, but it's this coming one is on October 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern time.
Awesome.
Topic is TBD.
And then bucking the trend on virtual events, live in San Diego, October 26th and 27th. The CS2 team, the Cloud Security and Compliance team, they've had a series of conferences around the country. I think they did Seattle, they did one in Austin, and now we have one in San Diego coming up. It's a really good 2-day event on everything you need to know CMMC. So check it out. Again, links in the chat. So that concludes events and news, unless someone has something else to throw in, and we can jump into the real meat of the conversation. Today, very excited to bring 2 guests to the table. Tasha Scott, Power Program Manager on the Powerapp's team. Sorry, I don't know why I did that. Program Manager on the Powerapp's App Studio team. I just stumbled through that one clearly well. And Sean Bugler, color commentary on the M365 Refresh Show, and Senior Solutions Architect at brand new to be announced Ernst & Young. Congratulations.
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
You are in new roles, aren't you?
Yep. So I don't start until the 27th. So this is, it's I'm taking a little bit of time between jobs because it's that golden hour where just work doesn't exist.
Those happen.
Awesome.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds delightful. What is that?
Right?
What are these golden hours you speak of, and how does one acquire them?
Yeah, Tasha, when you changed roles, did you get golden hours?
So I had pre-scheduled time off. But it wasn't quite right. Like, it was weird. So, but yes, no, I don't know.
Yes, no.
I'm gonna include that in my next negotiation when I change roles.
There were like silver hours. We'll call them that. They weren't
Sure. Why are we coloring these medals? I don't understand. What's the bronze level mean? I don't understand.
They were definitely bronze hours.
Can I get platinum hours? What is that?
Oh man.
Anyway.
So roles and titles are often very generic. Tasha, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing on the team?
Yeah, so I am part of the group that is responsible for when you are actually building Power Apps, the things that you use to build them. All of the lovely tools that you use to actually build Power Apps.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. And Sean, yours is also very generic. Tell us what you will be doing in a matter of spent golden hours. What you'll be doing with Ernst & Young.
Yeah, so I mean, today's my very last day with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, government agency based in the San Francisco Bay Area. We do the housing and transportation planning for the Bay Area. Today, for my very last day, my job was about tying all the different cloud-based services and platforms that we supported as an organization and tying them together in a way that made sense for our end users and for our external vendors and partners. Starting on the 27th with Ernst & Young, I'll be joining their Microsoft practice on the Biz Apps team. So I'll be helping them to stand up solutions using the wonderful tools that Tasha and her team put together. Big fan, by the way.
Hey, me too.
You're a fanboy. All right. Well, I can go ahead and kick off the first question here. This is for Tasha, which I would love for you to blog for us, by the way. Yeah, that's right. I snuck that in there, Jay. We know that
assignments galore.
What? It's true. I just gotta, okay. So we know that each US Gov Cloud has specific URLs to access Power Apps. Where do customers find out those details on the Power Apps URL differences?
Yeah, so if you're looking for the government version of make.powerapps.com or flow.microsoft.com, I actually created a lovely aka.ms link for you so that you don't have to remember everything I'm about to tell you. You can go to aka.ms/powerappsUSGov, and there's a delightful table on that page that will show you all of the URLs that you won't need to memorize. However, to just give you a high-level overview of what those URLs are, if you're trying to build Power Apps and you're in GCC, you would want to use make.gov.powerapps.us. For GCC High, you would want to use make.high.powerapps.us. And then for Flow, you would use, we love to keep you on your toes, so the order is a little different. Gov.flow.microsoft.us for GCC and high.flow.microsoft.us for GCC High. And for DoD, you would want to use, for Power Apps, you would want to use make.apps.appsplatform.us. And for Flow, you would want to use flow.appsplatform.us. So that's a lot. That's why I made you the aka.ms link so that you don't have, you're going to be like, what? That was a lot of URLs. And there are a lot.
So that aka was aka.ms/powerappsUSGov?
Yep, that's correct. And there's a table on that page that will take you, that will show you everything I just said and more.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, we'll definitely be doing a blog on that one. Well, and also just highlighting that because I did not know that there was there's an AKA for everything. But
of course there is.
Of course there is. But that would be awesome to share out with our community, even just periodically, because people forget, so that, awesome. Thank you for
We don't want you to have to remember big, long URLs. Here's a nice, tidy one that you can probably squirrel away in your brain.
I don't know. Yes. I think they roll right off the tongue.
Yeah, much like our hashtag.
Better you than me then. I was like, high.flow. Sorry.
For folks, I don't know if you can kind of see, like I sort of have like it's an old school Teams t-shirt. So if you see this like weird like icon, it's actually Teams. Anyways, let me ask my question. So coming to the SharePoint world, I love governance. Like I used to like read governance documentation as like bedtime reading. Not kidding. especially for government agencies, because I feel like, government agencies like love governance. Like it's just part of the culture, right? And everything has to have a policy and things like that. So my question, and Tasha, I'll go to you first, but what are some key considerations in governance when it comes to the Powerapp like as a service? Like, so if government customers are using the Powerapp service, like what are some things they need to think about when it comes to governing that data? And then after Tasha, I'll go to you, Sean.
And governance as bedtime reading is outstanding because it will put you right to sleep. We won't mention that part. So when you think about governance for the Power Platform, the very first thing you want to think about is environment management. Environments in the Power Platform are something that you can sort of think of as like a container where you can sort of have permissions that are controlled at the container level, and that way you can apply like a top level of permissions management to the things that exist within that container. When you're thinking about your environments, everyone has access to the default environment, and that comes just natively with the Power Platform. And when you think about the default environment, and we'll talk about some data loss prevention policy strategies that you can use. You don't want to have everything built in your default environment, though. You want to think about a couple of different things when you think about environments. You want to think about the work that you're trying to do and who that work impacts. Like, for example, if you had folks building line of business solutions for HR, you would want maybe them to have their own environment and finance to have their own environment, or even multiple environments for both of those business groups. And the other thing to think about with environments is application lifecycle management. So if you start to build really complex stuff, which is absolutely possible using the Power Platform, you may find yourself needing like a dev, test, and prod, and you can set up environments for each of those parts of your application lifecycle management process. And obviously you can contain each of those environments to the permissions that are needed specifically for them as well. I mentioned the default environment and data loss prevention policies. Data loss prevention policies are a way that you can control by the environment level what data connectors makers can use with Power Apps and Power Automate within that environment. And because everyone has access to the default environment by default, that environment should have the most restrictive data loss prevention policy. And then you should work with your app makers and your flow makers when you're provisioning the individual work or business unit environments to determine what data loss prevention policy and the containers or the connectors contained within make sense for the work that's going to be done in that environment. And there is also a tool that you can deploy called the Center of Excellence Toolkit, and that will give administrators and environment administrators insights into the apps and flows that are being built within that environment and the connectors that are being used in those apps and flows, and that can help you govern your environments as well.
Ooh, I love that. I know a lot of government customers that I've worked with in the past have used the COE toolkit, and it's a pretty awesome resource. And we'll make sure to link that here too as well. So Sean, kind of your perspective on this, like what are you thinking around governance for Power Platform? For
Tasha is such a hard act to follow.
Wow. You scared, Sean?
I am.
Well,
no, I mean, everything Tasha said is huge. I think that making sure that I would say that user education is probably the most important thing from my perspective. Like, all of that with the caveat of implementing the things Tasha's talking about, but making sure that users understand what it is that these things are, why it's restricted. Because I think that's going to help organizations that don't want to be so heavy-handed, but want to help users make the right decision is just as important as stopping them from doing it in the first place. It can go a long way. It can go a long way to creating a lot of gardeners helping to curate the garden instead of gophers who, are going about their day, but unknowingly making somebody else's job a lot more difficult.
I love that, gardeners versus gophers.
The gophers they don't know that they're being pains. They're going about their day. They're trying to just do their job.
No, that's actually I like using metaphors like that. Like that would actually be a good article of just like, are you a gardener or are you a gopher? Governance.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's actually a really good tie into the next question. Like, how do you manage the gophers who are creating things that become mission critical applications and workflows? Like, how do you ensure that we are protected if someone like Sean here, for example, leaves the organization and they own all of our critical workflows? Sean, good job, Sean.
I feel bad enough as it is. Thanks, Jay.
Play nice.
YOLO.
So, so Tasha, why don't you take it from like the academic perspective of what the theory is that you should be doing, and then Sean, you can tell us what you guys actually did to see how that lines up. And that was much more like pitting you against each other than I meant to do. So I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're mortal enemies now. Like I enjoyed our conversation, Tasha, but now I'm sorry. Like
Throwing the gauntlet. There's like gloves being thrown.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, this isn't just a podcast. This is the Thunderdome. So.
No, it's Mortal Kombat Power
365
Platform Edition.
Thunderdome.
No, I definitely
Oh,
need
God.
my helmet. Yeah, so let's pretend we're in an ideal world and you're starting out building things that the way that you should. And I would highly recommend that you plan ahead when building things that you envision to be mission critical, not just personal productivity, things that are going to be really important for either your immediate team or larger team. Always have more than one owner wherever possible. Just have that as sort of like a standard operating procedure that your group does. Even better if you are able to assign ownership or add ownership from a service account. If that's something that you're able to do for your apps and flows, recommend that as well. That'll save you some trouble should somebody decide that there are greener pastures elsewhere. As an environment admin, there are tools available to you to reassign ownership of orphaned flows if that does happen. And as a last ditch effort, if everything else is terrible and you can't fix it, you can work with your admins to transfer ownership of those assets via PowerShell.
I always thought the name orphan was such a sad descriptor. Like I don't know what it is. I think it's probably like
it is sad.
It is
Right?
a sad name.
It is sad.
It's from my personal experience in the play Oliver Twist. So I just have like this deep emotional connection to the word orphan. I'm like, oh, those poor flows.
That's right. They must be reparented.
No, I mean, I always think of Batman. So then I'm just going.
Oh, great.
No.
Oh,
These are two very different.
Wow. Wow.
don't allow your apps
He's
and
got
flows to
gadgets,
become the
but he's
dark night.
sad.
So Sean, to protect your flows, your flows from
night.
becoming the dark night, what did you guys do as you wrapped up your last few days?
Everything Tasha said, I 100% agree with. I think conceptually I would have loved if we had made some of those decisions in advance. I think one of the big challenges organizations face, particularly with these gophers we're talking about that don't necessarily know any better. Like when I started 3.5 years ago, I didn't know anything about the Power Platform. You just kind of start building. And so what ends up happening is you try something out and you're like, this is neat. And then you show somebody else and then they're like, this is cool. Can you share this with this team? And then, it just scattershot, the diaspora of an idea of a Powerapp or a Power Automate flow. And so by that point, all these well-intentioned best practices are, they're kind of out the window in terms of being able to do them from day one. But there's a lot of, everything Tasha mentioned, you can do at any point in the process. You can, get that service account. You can share owners. You can, take advantage of all these different tools and resources that are available. We didn't do any of that. Everything was under my name. So the last,
as is normal, right?
I mean, it's why it's so important that these tools are capable of, retroactively doing what needs to be done. I just spent the last 4 weeks documenting and migrating and reassigning ownership, and like Tasha mentioned, the ability to change the owner of a Powerapp, that was really important. There are a lot of mission critical apps that were under my account, and you can't just leave my account as a zombie account in perpetuity, because 10 years from now people are going to be Sean.
Dead flows.
It becomes the new service account.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Oh my
It's
God.
like the
Oh,
new
no.
Jarvis.
Of that. Please no. Oh my God. It's like
Don't do that. That's not a good practice.
No, it's not. So we did create like a service account and made sure it was properly licensed, and the PowerShell command I used was super seamless. No staff noticed that we changed ownership. Power Automate was a little bit more of a bear. In some instances, we hedged our bets and just exported the whole flow and re-imported it just to make sure that there were no residual user connections that we were bringing over. We really didn't want any dependencies on these load-bearing walls.
Tickets to the gun show.
That's right. Wow. For the people.
The plaid gun show. Jeez.
Did I mention I live in the Bay Area?
Oh, okay. So switching gears up a little bit. Let's talk about actual usage. People who are using the Power Automate, and they're using custom connectors. A lot of people talk about custom connectors. I see it on Twitter. I see people talking about, hey, I created this new custom connector to do X, Y, Z. Tell us what that means. What is a custom connector for those who have never used it? Maybe their organization doesn't provide them access to those yet. What is a custom connector? How might it be used?
Is that for me? Should I take them?
Yeah, let's start with Tasha. We're going to always start with Tasha, I think.
Okay. So a custom connector is a Power Platform wrapper for an API, either one that exists already or one that you create specifically for wrapping up in a custom connector and using in Power Apps, Power Automate. And it's one of the things that we think of as like a more pro dev tool within the Power Platform. If you are a low code or no code first citizen developer, you might look at the custom connector tools and be like, oh my goodness, what is this? I have no idea. So that's one of the places where we think we love the idea of fusion dev teams where you have pro dev or pro code and low code, no code citizen developers working together. And so your pro dev, pro code people can build custom connectors for you, again, leveraging already existing APIs or APIs that they build specifically for this purpose. And they can provide those as sort of like reusable building blocks for the Power Automate flows and the Power Apps that you as a citizen developer build. And yeah, I've used custom connectors a bunch of times. It's something that, especially going back to our previous conversation in talking about data loss prevention policies, custom connectors can be governed in the same way that a standard connector can be, and included or excluded, so that you can make sure that only specific audiences are able to use your custom connector. And they're very powerful tools for creating really excellent line of business applications, especially if you have stuff that's maybe in ancient places that otherwise you might not be able to access with normal connectors.
So Sean, how does that work practicality, right? You've worked in GCC. I know it's your last day, but you've been there for a while and you've had to build these things. Has that practically worked out well for integrating, dissimilar systems?
Yeah, I would say that one of the important things to know, and of course, for those of you that are watching that are in the GovClouds, you might already know this, that not all service connectors are available, that are available in the commercial universe are available in GovClouds. There's, as you go from GCC to GCC High to DoD, the number of available connectors gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And so custom connectors are really valuable because they allow you to kind of supersede what Microsoft designates as like a sanctioned connector. Like my organization uses Asana as a time and task management tool. And so that connector, at least, as recently as 2 months ago, wasn't in GCC. So to be able to tap into a custom connector that does tap into those Asana APIs is super important for us. If we as an organization have decided that we're comfortable using the tool or that we've cut the appropriate licensing agreement with an organization to make sure that our data is protected, it's okay to tap into those custom connectors. And in fact, it can be super useful, but it's also really useful, as many government employees know, to be able to connect with services that are so much more custom, so much more focused on the government sector that may not necessarily have what we might describe as consumer-friendly APIs, if there is such a thing. And then one last thing I'll flag here, which isn't necessarily the case for Gov just yet, but hopefully will be in the future, is the independent publisher connectors. I don't know how realistic that is, but this idea that, custom connectors can be built by the community and made available through, maybe an opt-in, like Yammer was for so many years.
It's not going to happen, Sean. It's a nice dream.
I'm just trying
It's
to
not
throw
gonna
it out
happen.
there for the people. This is my soapbox.
I'm having a hard enough time getting my agency to agree to use patterns and practices code because it's open source. That means we're gonna have to actually download and scan the source code ourselves before we and compile it before we're gonna be willing to use it. Right? There's so many security things in the government space.
Yeah, but to that end, custom connectors can be really, really useful as long as you've already got those agreements in place with those companies.
Awesome.
Yep. Those
so
Fusion dev teams.
Yeah. So for both Tasha and Sean, how about you go first this time? Okay.
All right.
There you go. So how do you get started learning about Powerapp? How did you get started learning about Powerapp? What would you recommend? And how would, I as a beginner get started building my first Powerapp?
I love the pre-built templates that Microsoft makes available. I think there's no better way to start than with these pre-built options that kind of give you an insight into how the people who are, building these products are thinking through, what best practices look like. It's still so early in the Power Platform journey. They've been out for a couple of years now, but that's just a drop in the bucket when it comes to the grand scheme of how long these tools will be having an impact within organizations. So I love the idea of the templates because it's really useful for me to take apart the VCR, so to speak. For those of you who are watching who don't know what VCRs are, they are.
Oh no!
You did not just call us old, did you?
Oh no!
Wow.
No.
But I think that's really useful to be able to see how these different elements connect in a true working app. Because if you don't work at an organization who has these Fusion teams or even have anybody who is familiar with what Power Apps are, that can go a really long way in helping you to understand just the basics of it.
Right.
I yield my time.
Nope.
Tasha, is that a best practice from Microsoft's perspective?
Yeah, we actually, one of the templates is like a how to build a Power App template. So I definitely agree with Sean that using the templates is a great place to sort of like poke around and see. The templates are mostly like sort of business scenario based. And so you can sort of like grab one and start seeing like how the different controls are connected together, how data can be sent back and forth, and how a lot of that is handled automatically for you. And the other thing that I would really like to promote is using the customize forms button available to you in like your SharePoint lists. And so when you do that, you'll be taken to the Maker Studio, and it will show you some pre-built parts that you can still, again, learn from. And don't worry, you can undo it if it's not making it permanent if you decide to push those buttons in your SharePoint lists. But it's a great way to sort of see just to give you a flavor of what a vanilla Power App that's with a SharePoint data layer behind it, what that looks like, how it works, and then you can sort of tweak it to your specifications, and you can use that to sort of ideate on future form customizations that you may want to do. That's definitely how I got started. I come from SharePoint land, as Rima is well aware. I was a SharePoint consultant for federal government and DoD before I came to Microsoft, and built a lot of stuff on top of SharePoint, and then transitioned to building Power Platform based things first on top of SharePoint stuff. And so it was a pretty good transition for me. There are also learning paths available for you, and I don't have that URL right off the top of my head, but I can provide it in the chat.
Is it the one on Microsoft, like on the All Up Microsoft Learn page? Oh, okay.
Yep.
I know we could think that later.
Yeah. And that's a great way. And there's honestly one of the most lovely things too about the Power Platform is that both Power Apps and Power Automate have really great communities that are available for you to tap into and learn from. There's so much getting started content out there on YouTube and in folks' blogs that you're never too far away from somebody who's ready and excited to help folks who are just learning with the Power Platform.
Awesome.
Yeah, if I could toss,
basically answered the same thing where I was going to ask, like, what's the most popular way to build your first Power App, but you kind of.
Oh, we can still talk about that.
Okay. But
Yeah.
let's talk about it. What is the most popular way
Popular?
to build your first Power App? Or in your opinion, I suppose, since popularity is subjective.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer this with like any kind of numbers to back it up, but I would imagine like starting from SharePoint is probably a really huge way that most people are making their first Power App today. And a lot of that is because like it's a readily available tool for you to customize your SharePoint forms. We've been using SharePoint lists for a really long time now, and all of us want to make our list forms very pretty and functional. And this is a great way to do it. You can also use Excel. People have feelings about like, putting data in Excel, but you can actually build a custom form on top of Excel using Power Apps. And that's a perfectly great way to learn as well. Super simple to get started there. And then of course, the native data layer for all Power Platform and D365 is Dataverse. And Dataverse is a great data layer for Power Platform based solutions as well.
Yeah, I think you're already giving me ideas for an upcoming blog. Or maybe we'll just do
what I'm here for.
One of this episode. I don't know. There's just a lot of content that I want to share. So
yeah, and I think Dataverse. Oh, go ahead, Sean. You're more important than me.
Not a chance. I would never say that, Jay. No, I was just going to add in. I think that obviously everything Tasha said was spot on. But I think that one thing I'll add in there when you're thinking about what your first Power App should be, trying to identify something that's personally valuable, because I think that that's going to give you the opportunity to put yourself in the stakeholder seat and start to ask those what ifs that really challenge you. Because when you're building something you don't care about, or you're not passionate about, or you have no, value in, you're just going to put it out and be done. But if you're building something that has personal value, whether it's productivity wise or something goofy, like how much water do I mix with my coffee when I'm doing a pour over, like that's what's going to challenge you to go like, oh, but what if I did this? What if I, programmed all the different cups, and maybe I put QR codes on the cup so I can scan it and it'll tell me exactly how much water and coffee should be the mix for that pour over. Like those are the kinds of things that are going to make you learn because you care. You're passionate about it all of a sudden, and you're going to make your life harder deliberately because you want to build something cool that's valuable to you.
So Sean, in your experience, I'm gonna change the gears a little bit. Let's talk licensing, everybody's favorite topic when we talk about Microsoft products.
I have to go.
It's important, right? Because we got to figure out how do we get the features we want, and then how do we pay for it. So, what are some of the challenges you see when you were doing Power Apps and Power Automate for your organization?
Oh, thank God, I get to talk about just the challenges. All right.
You can talk about the good stuff, but we know it's more challenging than.
Yeah, I mean, the challenges are really just kind of around like the concept of premium, and this throws right back to user education. You can't bank on Microsoft building an explanation to everything that you put out there. As much as we would like for that to be the case, it's just not. That's not part of the product development process. It's definitely embedded in a lot more of the things that we're developing now. I think Power Apps is a great example of helping you learn as you go, which is awesome. But no, the big challenges are really just helping users to understand the terminology and the phrasing, because what premium means to one. I genuinely had like an executive director in our organization ask, is this like a micro purchase? Do I like $1.99? Like, is this an in-app purchase premium? And it's a valid question, because the model of what an app is to a normal person isn't necessarily going to directly align with the parlance of the modern workplace and the Microsoft universe. So I would say that that's probably the biggest challenge, is just acquainting people with the information they need to know, making that accessible. And then to that end, not immediately leaping into premium spaces. I think that there are a lot of really great functionalities that come along with the basic entitlements in a Microsoft 365 license. Take advantage of them. I don't think, some people describe it as having both arms tied behind your back. I don't think that that's the case. You can do a ton of cool stuff, and most of the stuff I migrated was pure Microsoft talking to Microsoft, just doing custom things in that space. I know that there's a lot to be said about it once you bring Dataverse into the conversation, and candidly, I don't have a ton of insight on that. But yeah, I think that those kinds of things can really make a big difference when you're talking about it within the scope of an org.
So for something like Power Automate, did you as an organization purchase premium for everybody? Or I think it's interesting. Whenever I talk to somebody, people go, "Oh, that's too expensive," and I don't think they think about other ways to do that. And I know you and I have had some conversation on kind of share with everybody here, how you guys ended up doing that in your organization to keep the costs reasonable.
Sure. So without advocating for multiplexing, I'm going to go ahead and say that we bought 2 per user licenses on the Powerapp side of things. And we did that simply for the org-wide implemented things that I was building. You're going to have your core developers that are going to be building these things that impact or scale out to an entire team or an entire division or an entire company. And so in those instances, it can make sense to get the per user licensing, especially on the Power Automate side of things. On the Power Apps side of things, it can be a little bit more nuanced, and as well it should be. I think that buying an app outright with that licensing might make more sense for most orgs. But so we went with the per user model on the Power Automate side of things.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you would able because you're doing now you're doing somewhat of a service account as you're transitioning out, then you could get those licenses for the service account and maybe the developer, and then that keeps your costs low. How does that work on the Power Apps side, right? The Power Apps, did you purchase a single app for something that is going to use, say, Dataverse, or did you kind of stay with the free model, or how did that work for your organization?
Yeah, we're a relatively small org. I say it's still my last day. We're a relatively small org, 360 people. And so to that end, it wouldn't necessarily have been a full arm and a full leg to license everybody. But we did try to identify areas where we could be cost efficient. And so that meant, leveraging the Microsoft 365 entitlements that I was talking about earlier. So we run off of SharePoint lists for everything that I built. And that's fine for most stuff, as long as it's just basic read, write, edit. Microsoft lists are incredible. They're robust. They've been around forever in the grand scheme of things. And they've only gotten better. I mean, the rate of progression of these services is incredible when you look at where they were 6 years ago. We really focused on trying to wring as much value as we could out of those basic entitlements. And we were successful with it. I mean, did you have to get creative sometimes? Sure. But that's how you learn, and that's how you build better apps. And when I eventually go and figure out Dataverse, that's going to make me that much better.
Well, it's going to be a little harder on the licensing side, right? Because of every user who uses the app will have to have that capability.
So whenever I was working with customers around integrating Power Apps into Teams, this was a big conversation. And I think the hardest thing for folks to kind of wrap their head around was, do I license the whole organization or not? What am I really trying to do with this? And I think the organizations that were super successful in getting the licensing right were very good about planning about how and their intention around using Power Apps to kind of shadow or follow in line with what Sean was saying. I think if you know what you want to use it for, I think the licensing question is easier to solve because the justification's there, right? So.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on what Sean said too about start with your existing entitlements and just get a feeling for what kind of digital transformation projects you want to undertake with the Power Platform. So that can really inform places where you start to feel the pinch of maybe your existing entitlements aren't meeting your needs. You'll have a better understanding of that up front, and that way you can think about your licensing concerns once you understand the places where you're starting to feel like that belt's a little too tight. And you can address the concerns from there, not just start right out of the gate with buy everything for everybody. I mean, I want you to buy everything for everybody.
Well, and wouldn't it also be looking at it in terms of efficiency and effort too? They even say, for example, when I'm making a metaphor, but if you're shopping for food, there's something that they pleasantly call the ADHD tax, where it's I'm not going to buy this big thing of lettuce and chop it myself. I'm going to buy a bag of shredded lettuce because I'm not going to sit there shredding lettuce for several hours. So sometimes it's considering your projects and what you're using that for and how much other effort you would make if you didn't have X thing in your licensing, or like, how much more effort do you want to put into this to have a workaround that's going to take you 5 hours versus just getting the thing. It's sometimes
kind of
that aspect too.
I think to round out the conversation around licensing too, I know we're going to be posting some links, right, around like licensing. So I know, because it's like a big topic that we're all kind of like, oh, what do we do about it? So just FYI, that should be available here too.
And just to head off, Dataverse for Teams. Yes, Dataverse for Teams exists. You can absolutely use that. I know that somebody's going to comment about this. I'm saying it. I'm also saying my organization was a Slack shop, and that wasn't a solution. But to that end, if
we're going to mute that one out and post it.
It's
right
okay.
in the heart.
They can coexist.
But and can I add a little asterisk there too? Dataverse and Dataverse for Teams are two different beasts. So make sure, like, a lot of times there's conflation because the names are so similar. Just make sure when you're thinking about Dataverse for Teams and you're thinking about Dataverse that you understand that those are two separate parts of the same whole, if that makes sense.
Yep.
It doesn't, actually. It doesn't. What is the difference?
Well, if there's a 30-second answer to that, I welcome you to jump on that, Tasha. But before you do, we had planned a couple of questions about Dataverse, which would allow us to dig into this. But based on how the conversation's been going, and we've decided we're going to hold that off for a later episode, and we'll do a deeper dive on Dataverse and Dataverse for Teams and how you can use these to build beyond just using SharePoint lists, for example.
So you're saying
Tasha,
I wrote
you
all
want
this
to
for
approach
nothing?
This is a podcast, Sean, not a broadcast for your manifesto.
That looks like the Cliff's Notes version to me. Sean, it looks like you really were able to get it neat and tidy.
Didn't know I'm a props guy.
It's certainly not the unabridged version.
That's awesome.
Well,
That's awesome.
This has been an amazing conversation, and I did everything I could not to name drop our products for license management during that very intense conversation, but check the chat for a link. But no, seriously, Tasha and Sean, I really appreciate the insight you brought to this. The Power platform is becoming more and more of a conversation across the federal government. I've got an email in my inbox right now from one of our customers who are just trying to wrap their head around, how are we going to license it? What does Dataverse do to this? How does Teams integrate with all of this? So being able to start that conversation for our government listeners and try and give them some resources to go on. I really appreciate you coming on the show to do that.
It's my pleasure. I had a great time.
Thank you for having me.
So did we. Sean's going to go back to bed after this. Look, it's right behind him.
The only reason I turn my camera on these days is personal accountability. I would not make this thing otherwise. I know what you're thinking, those of you at home. Better Homes and Gardens, virtual background? No, this is real.
Real life?
Oh, man.
If that
Mine
were
is
real life,
not.
you'd be able to lift a blanket and show us. I'm just saying. This has been a great time as usual for our listeners. For those following along, we'll be back next month. We're having a conversation about SharePoint because why not? We haven't done that yet. How have we had 7 episodes of this and not talked about SharePoint Online? And actually, I'm really excited. Sean, your M365 Refresh partner, Matt Wade, is going to be joining us next week,
That's a mistake. Cancel that episode now.
Along with our first return guest, Amy Cisse from Cisse Consulting. So really excited to talk about SharePoint next month. Tasha, Sean, again, thank you so much. And Sarah, Rima, Jeremy, anything you want to add before we close out for the day? No? All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Month.
See everybody around.